Last time I did a video on the disappearing 9 patch. Well, today I'm going to talk to you about the double disappearing 9 patch. Yep, it's got a little more steps to it, it's a little more putsy, but some cool things you can do with it. So stay tuned if you want to know how to make the double disappearing 9 patch. Hi, I'm Wendy J. Haney, and I'm here to help you discover the joy of quilting and discover it's not intimidating. If you have an interest in sewing and quilting and interested in making wonderful things for your friends and family, because it's priceless to give those to them, then this is the channel for you because I'm going to show you how easy it is. Okay, disappearing 9 patches, whether it's the double or the disappearing one, it starts with a 9 patch. So here we have a 9 patch, and I'm doing a scrappy version. A lot of people, though, may choose to do something a little more structured, which means that you may have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 unique pieces of fabric and a lighter fabric that matches for everywhere else. The key thing, though, is you're going to need 2 sets. So really, you're kind of working in pairs when you're working with the double disappearing 9 patch. So just keep that in mind as I'm working with scrappy. So I have this 9 patch all laid out, nice and scrappy, but I need to make a second one to go with it. I'm getting all messed up here. So here is my other 9 patch. I've decided I can do scrappy. I like scrappy, but I'm a little bit too anal to go totally scrappy. So I wanted a little structure in my 9 patch. So I'm sticking with a darker blue fabric in the middle. It's going to be scrappy, but I'm going to keep finding the darker blue fabrics. And I have a tone-on-tone fabric, so I don't want to get that upside down like that one is. So here is my other 9 patch that I'm going to do. So if you're working with coordinating fabrics, basically you're going to want 2 sets. So one, you're going to want a neutral fabric, usually a lighter one, that is going to be across all of your blocks in the middle of your blocks. So 4 blocks. Then, if you wish, you can have a coordinating color in the middle and then your squares on the outside. So a lot of people will get a set of coordinating fabrics in 2 different color tones that coordinate well together. So you're going to make one block with one set of fabrics, and then you're going to make the other block with the other set of fabrics. And then we're going to do a flip flop. We're going to mix and match stuff. So you're going to stay tuned and see how that works. Like the last one, we're starting with our 9 patch. And the easiest way to make this is lay it out and then flip your squares over, your center squares over to your left, and then stack them on top of each other, just like this. And then this column, stack, stack. Now, you can take all of this to your sewing machine and you can, having a gap here. You can stitch them, chain stitch them. It's one right after another. It makes it go very fast. The other thing that I've discovered is if you're doing this, it makes sense to get all your 9 patches made first. Get those done and then move on to the next step instead of trying to do each block one at a time. Just make sure you got the first set of blocks right, especially if you're working with coordinating fabric, so you know the layout. Use those as your templates for all the rest of them. That way you're sure that everything is good before you make like 20 of them and go, oops. So I'm going to take these to the sewing machine and show you what I mean when I'm going to do chain piecing with these. So this is what I mean by chain piecing. Yep. I just sewed each block together without cutting it in the middle. Therefore, they're all in one strip. I also have this thing called a leader at the top. The benefit of the leader is it's just a scrap of fabric that you start stitching on. And that way, Well, usually when you first start stitching, the threads aren't quite all in sync and it gets a little bit of blob of thread. This way it's nice and clean by the time it hits the fabric you really care about. So, if I'd stayed at the sewing machine, I would have had my fabric like this. And then I could have just flipped that open, put on the next piece, because I stacked my other fabric in the right order. And did that, and did that. Whoops. And did that, and then I'd have the whole thing sewn together. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. Key thing is when you're doing that, make sure your pieces over here don't get twisted. Make sure you've got your light, your middle, your light. So now, you end up with basically your square all laid out just like you need it to be and all attached. Some people will actually just finger press at the sewing machine and continue to put this together at the sewing machine. I find that I get better accuracy if I stop there, come back here, actually press it with the iron, and then put my pieces together. So I am going to cut mine apart here because this makes it a heck of a lot easier. And then your middle here, you're going to want to put your seams. I finger press them first usually before I go to the iron. So you want your seams, to go towards your middle. The reason we're doing this is so that you can nest the seams. So one set of seam is going that way and the other is going that way. And that when they fit together, they nest very nicely and you have nice even seams. And then your top row, you're going to press to the outside, and the same with your bottom. Okay, so once I go and get these ironed together, or pressed, and then I'm going to get them sewn together, we're good to go. And then, I will go do those in a minute, you've got your 9-patch. So now you're ready for the first set of cuts. This is a little bit different than your disappearing 9-patch. In this case, you're going to cut 2.5-inch strips away from the entire outside edge excuse me, of your block. So I line up my edge 2.5, and sometimes I do a little futzing to make sure I've got it in there, and then I use my lines on my ruler to line up as well. Okay, so 2.5 inches from there. I just flip it around. I'm going to do 2.5 over here. There we go. So you end up with 2 long pieces. And then turn it. So basically you want to end up with a square left in the middle. To help you remember, you're now trimming again on your shorter edge. So now you want 2 cut pieces that are short. So these are once again 2.5 inches. And 2.5 inches. And we're going to do this on both of our blocks. So I'm going to go sew my other 9-patch together, and I'm going to trim it up exactly like this, and I will be back. Now that I've got my other 9-patch together, I also want to mention what I do on the back when I press them. It's a little more putsy, but it really helps you have a nice flat seams, because with this method of things, you're going to do a lot of cutting of this block into smaller pieces, sewing it together, so you're going to have a lot of seams. I take my seams here and I twist them a little. So basically there's usually like 2 stitches before you get into the seam here, that if you just if you just twist it, you'll find that it just comes apart and it makes a little not nine patch, a little 4 patch, a little pinwheel. And you just flatten that out and then it reverses which direction your seams lie. And like this. And it makes it so much nicer and smoother and flatter when it comes to your quilting and piecing later. Okay, so we are now back to, I'm going to do a quick cut up of this block, just like we did the last. 2.5 inch strips all the way around the block. And I use my ruler mark and the seams to kind of make sure I'm getting a straight cut for my seams. Okay, so now we have quilt block 1 that has 2 long strips and 2 short strips, and the same for our other block. Here's where the fun begins. Now you're going to take those strips from one block and you're moving them over and switching them with the other block. And this is why it's important when you're thinking about, or this is why when you're using coordinating fabrics, you want a set of 5 fabrics, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for one block, and a set of coordinating 5 fabrics for the other block. And then of course your matching light that it stays the same. And you could also go with the same fabric in the center for both blocks. Whatever you like to do. But the key thing is both blocks need to be different, because you're going to then switch out the fabric. Okay, so we're going to just work with one of the blocks for now. So now we've got the block with one, and now we've got the strips from the other. So now you decide how you want them to look. Key thing here is, so, do I like that? I can be kind of, nope, like that better. I can be kind of putsy. So the whole scrappy, yeah, I don't do scrappy very well. I still have to have some say. So, lay out your short sides first. Then lay out your long pieces. Key thing is you want your fabrics to match. So you're going to end up with an L of matching fabric on both. That's kind of important, I think, when putting your blocks together. Now, if you choose to not to and want to do it, okay, like really scrappy all over the place, then go for it. It's totally up to you. But I'm going a little more structured, and I want them to go like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew, first of all, set those aside, and sew our pieces together here. And if you're lucky, ahoo, my seams will nest. My seams will nest there nicely. So that will work out very well when I put that together. If not, well, just go press these the different directions so they nest nicely. So you get that done, you're going to sew those together, and then you're going to come back and you're going to sew these pieces together. And those together. And then we're going to set this aside because we're doing this lickety-split way. You're going to end up with a block like this. As you can see, I've got my matching fabrics here in the corners, and you go, wait a minute. You got a little bit of leftover on the edges. Yep, that's what's going to happen. This ends up being a 13-inch block. And you could just, trim up the sides with a short ruler, but I actually prefer to make sure it's a little closer to my 13. And you know what? If it's not a 13-inch square, don't worry about it. It's fine. It is what it is. This is what happens when you're taking lots of blocks, cutting them in pieces, sewing them back together again with other blocks. it's not going to be perfect. It won't. And if you're 100% perfect all the time, well, hot dog, good for you. I'm not. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of use my seams to see that I'm kind of squared up there, and then I'm gonna lop off our lovely edges there. Oh, look at there, look at there. Now I'm getting something that actually looks like a square again, right? Yep. Oops, not quite enough pressure there. Okay, now we've got that. Make sure, and of course, make sure as you're doing this, make sure you're pressing it in between each time, because as you want it pressed and nice and neat before you do your cutting. You'll also notice in here that I have some batiks. I have regular fabric. You know what? You can do whatever you want. Don't let somebody tell you you can't combine your batiks with your regular fabrics. This is scrappy. I can do whatever I want. It's my quilt, and so can you. So I'm going off my scrap bin, and it's full of everything. So now we have this. And we're not done yet. We're going to cut it up a little more. So now we're going to cut it as if we did the disappearing 9 patch. So if you watch that, in that case, you're going to cut it in the middle. This way and this way. This middle square is 4.5 inches. So that means the center of it is 2.25 inches. So with that said, I prefer myself to, instead of squaring up the whole block and then measuring in and being, in the inside, I'm just going to use my center, because that's the one piece that has not been cut before, and I'm using that. But you could take a little marker, and you could instead go, okay, I'm supposed to have a 13-inch block. Mine's close, so 7.5, and mark 7.5, and mark 7.5, 7.5, 7.5. That's fine. That will work. My preference is to use my seams and measure from the inside of my block. And I might do a little adjusting of my seams there and there. 2.25, 2.25. Don't do what I did a little bit ago, and I was thinking about something else at the same time I was cutting, and I'm so used to doing 2.5. I cut 2.5 and went, oh no, all that work, and I screwed it up, because basically then half my block was a complete waste. The other half, I could salvage. I just trimmed off an extra 1/4 inch. So 2.25 inch. Okay, leave it in place. Do the same thing this direction. 2.25. One, two, yeah. We're double checking. Today has been the day of curses and unhappiness with my cuts. Okay, so there we go. We have lots of blocks. So right now you have a lot of 6.5 inch blocks. Depending on how you want to lay out your quilt, you can do a lot of things with this. This is very similar to our disappearing 9 patch. We could twist it like this. My goal of putting the blue in the center is to somehow end up with kind of a diagonal structure with those blue, with the blue blocks. I have a whole bunch of others that I've already done. And of course, I'm not quite sure how it's all gonna turn out. So, if we do that, we can do that. I could switch it with this and do some of that. But then I could go like this. No, let's see, I want my blue there. I could instead of put my L, this is why I wanted my fabrics to match on the edges. I kind of want that L of matching fabrics in my quilt. Okay, so that's a nice layout. So basically, you can lay out these 6.5-inch blocks and make a larger block however you want, to your heart's desire. I actually don't know what I'm going to do with them. I am not going to actually sew the final block together because I'm going to wait until I have quite a few more blocks. Then I'm going to lay it on the floor and see what I can end up with my blues. Like this, like that, like this. Oh, now I've kind of got a big row of blue in the middle. Okay, that's interesting. That's the key thing with this. It's fun. So you're slicing and dicing a lot of blocks. You sew together, you cut, you sew together, you cut. And then you end up with 6.5-inch blocks, and you can manipulate them all over the place and do whatever you want with them and find what works for you. I'm going to leave it at that and eventually figure out what I'm going to do. You'll have to go over to wendyjhaney.com. Eventually, I'm not saying right away, eventually I will get a blog post made up on this, and we'll eventually add to it and show you what I actually did with all of my pieces. What I've decided in trying to prepare for this video and everything I've been doing is the best way, I think the quickest way, and I think I mentioned it before, is do your 9 patches first. Make a whole bunch of 9 patches. Get them all sewed up, make sure they're laid out the way you want, especially if you're doing coordinating fabrics, that they all match. Slice and dice them. Then go sew the next pieces. All of those together. Then do your next slicing. Then you got a pile of these 6.5-inch blocks, and you can go figure out how you want to lay them out to make them look the way you want. Hope you found that enjoyable, and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video today. You can follow me by doing 1, subscribing to this YouTube channel, hitting the bell icon on the subscribe button so you're notified every time I drop a new video. But you can also find me over on Facebook, Wendy J. Haney. So facebook.com/Wendy J. Haney. Also, I have a Facebook group for people that love needlework, books, wine, all sorts of things also. The name of the group is called Life Fulfilled, Quilting, Needlework, Wine. Basically, you can't miss it. It's facebook.com/group/Life Fulfilled. You'll be able to find it. You can also find me over on my website, wendyjhaney.com. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate all your comments and feedback that you're providing me. Take care.